back. New York City baseball, past, present, and future. My name is Ralph Tyko. I'm coming to you from Alameda, California, the northern part of the state of California. And I'm right across the bay from San Francisco, down by the lagoon in Alameda. Those of you who are in Alameda or have ever heard Archie Bunker would appreciate that. We're down by the lagoon where it's a bit of a stench every now and again. But a lovely place to live, Alameda, California. I am doubly blessed today. I'm flying solo, and none of my co-hosts are here. They're all big Dodger fans, Dodger worshipers. I'm not a Dodger fan. I'm a Giant fan, but I'm a Dodger worshiper and kind of a historian for all of this. And I feel perfectly qualified to interview a returnee to the airwaves. He's the author of, among a bunch of other best-selling great books, one of my favorite baseball books, probably up in the top 5 of all time. It's When We Played the Game, and his name is Danny Peary, but he's not here about that. He's here about another book that he wrote, well, actually edited. Here it is, The Remarkable Life of Baseball's Most Significant Player, and that's Jackie Robinson. Danny Peary, welcome back.
Hi, it's great to be back with you, Ralph. It's always great when people even know about my book, We Played the Game, so you're a fan of it.
I love that book.
Really?
You were on
really
before. You mentioned that people call you about obituate when
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say New York Times always seems to, the only time they ever remember me is when one of the ball players from the year of 1947 and 1964 die, and then they go to my book, We Played the Game, and they find some great quote that they said, and they put it in the obituary. So I'm linked to a lot of players in that book, which is fine with me. So the book was a tribute to them.
The book was monumentally written in the sense that the task was monumental in the sense that you took 64 ball players.
65.
65. Oh, I thought so. Okay. 65 ball players in that era. You interviewed them and you set it up by year. So their careers overlapped each other, and year by year, some would come in depending on their career, about the team. You had to get every team and every year, and it intertwined their history, much more so their coming up experience than their major league experience. Because these guys were not all stars. A lot of these guys were, what made them interesting is that they played with stars, and they were all articulate enough to go back and describe those days. And not only did they play with stars, but they played with interesting people, and they were interesting themselves. So the players were well thought out. The idea was well thought out. The era was not even arguably the best. 1947 to 1964 is what it was about for baseball.
The Yankee dynasty years.
Right, it was after Jackie.
The Yankee dynasty years, and for you who's a Giants fan, and for me who was I was an A's fan and an Indians fan, but I also rooted for the Giants when they played the Yankees in the World Series, and rooted for the Dodgers when they played the Yankees the World Series. It was a big era for us Yankee haters, right? We rooted against the Yankees when they completely dominated baseball from that era, but it was such a remarkable era.
We worshipped those same players that we were rooting against, and wanted to know everything about them. And this book really completes it. For me, it's great because it goes into the minor league experience. And back then, in the 40s and 50s, and even into the 60s, there were a ton of minor league teams, leagues. There was C League. A today was C back then. There was a D League. Each team had maybe 14, 15 minor league teams as compared to 5 or 6 today. And I think that's what's wrong with the game, is players come up too fast. They don't get minor league experience, this, that, and the other thing. But that's neither here nor there. I want to talk to you about the Jackie book that you wrote that you edited in the same way that you did the Derek Jeter book. Quote,
well, both books, if you really think about it, are an offshoot of We Played the Game. We played the game as an oral history, and it was only in the words of the players. It took readers through an era, 47 to 64, juxtaposing each of the players and their stories year by year. So one person would start talking, and he would talk about his 1947. What happened in 47 or 1964, or 1953, and then the next player would take over, and then we'd rejoin each of those players the following year and take you through all the way through their careers, or till 1964, when some of the guys weren't playing anymore that I interviewed, and some guys were just beginning their careers, like Tim McCarver, people such as that. So this book and the Jeter book, this book being Jackie Robinson in quotes, and you had mentioned the subtitle, The Remarkable Life of Baseball's Most Significant Player. It's, again, all quotes, but it's different in the sense that it's not just me interviewing people. It's although there are a lot of quotes from interviews I did, but it's quotes from magazines and newspapers and columns that Jackie wrote, and books that people wrote about Jackie, and books that Jackie wrote, and his speeches and his interviews, and all that kind of thing. And what I find, and probably you found when we play the game, there's a real authenticity when it's just quotes. So there's quotes dating back from 1919 when he was born till he died in 72, and even till through today, because his legacy has grown considerably. He's more famous now than he was at any time since 1947, probably.
Tuning in, Jackie Robinson was deemed to be by Martin Luther King as the founder of the Civil Rights Movement. So this book transcends baseball.
Yeah, there are a lot of quotes, in fact, by Martin Luther King about Jackie Robinson, and it has that. I think Jackie Robinson is the perfect person for an oral history such as this, with the quotes, with the authenticity that I talked about, but it also that there are like 3,000 quotes in this book, and every quote is either about Jackie Robinson or by Jackie Robinson. So the story, the way I see it, and you probably felt this a little bit when we played the game, it's a huge book of it. It's hard to put down. And the fact here we have quote followed by quote followed by quote. A lot of people tell me it's a page turner. And so they find a hard time putting it down, going through his whole story. And along the way, there are all these surprises, and you mentioned one right there, how important Jackie Robinson was, not just to baseball, but what made him the most significant player ever is his effect on America socially. He was a very important historical figure, somebody who, in 1947, when he played with the Dodgers, breaking the color line, in 1946, when he played in AAA and he broke the AAA color line, a lot of people were watching him, and one of them was Martin Luther King, and who later resorted to, but his strategy was nonviolent demonstrations, nonviolent resistance, And that's what Jackie Robinson in 1947 and 1948, when he joined the Brooklyn Dodgers, he had made a pact with owner, president, general manager Branch Rickey that for 2 years he would not react to heckling from the stands or from the opposing dugouts, or for fan mail that came in that was completely hostile and death threats, and he would keep silent for 2 years. And Dr. Martin Luther King watched this, and when he was devising a strategy for the civil rights movement, for the Christian Southern Leadership Conference, which he led, he looked to Jackie Robinson as a model, and he was very vocal about giving Jackie Robinson credit for being part of his inspiration.
I think Branch Rickey instilled in Jackie or made him promise that the first year he would, as Branch Rickey said, turn the other cheek. And
yes. That was the thing he had the guts that Jackie Robinson said, "Do you want me to have the guts to fight back against the hecklers?" And he said, "I want you to have the guts not to fight back." So for at least 1 year in 1947, and I think 1948 too, Jackie Robinson pledged to Branch Rickey that he wouldn't be vocal. I said heckling from the stands and from the dugouts, but also umpires and not just heckling, but other opposing players who try to step on him when he played first base that first year or slid into him. I think he changed by 48 the second year. I think he was more aggressive, particularly with guys, because he moved to second base and guys would slide in with their spikes high, and Jackie would jump up in the air and sort of come down right on top of them. So that taught them not to do that. And Rachel herself told me, Rachel Robinson, the widow of Jackie Robinson, told me that she didn't think there was ever a real pact for 2 years of silence and by Jackie. She thinks the media created that, but I'm not sure. There was something there that went on.
Okay. On these airs over the past 2 or 3 months, we, Peter Trunk primarily and I, one of the co-hosts, have faced the issue of whether or not Pee-wee Reese actually hugged Jackie Robinson, and was it 1947, or was it 1948? And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you. We've had so many conflicting opinions, stories. Peter Golenbach said that he'd been told.
He believes it did happen. Yes.
It happened. Do you think it happened in 47?
I'm on the fence with it, but I have an answer which might sound a little wishy-washy. That if it didn't happen then, it happened another time. I think whether we're saying it happened in 1947. For your listeners, let me just say, during the first road trip Jackie Robinson had as a Brooklyn Dodger, he was treated hostilely in almost every place he went, Pittsburgh and Chicago. Then he went into Cincinnati, where he was getting death threats in the mail. I'm going to shoot you during the game, so beware of that. And then there was, when the game started, this was the first game of the road trip. Supposedly there was a lot of hostility and heckling from the stands, and Jackie Robinson was a little unnerved by this, and Pee-wee Reese showing his camaraderie. Pee-wee Reese was the most respected player on the Dodgers and was from Kentucky, nearby Kentucky to Cincinnati. So he went over to Jackie Robinson, according to history or to myth, or we don't know. put his arm around Jackie Robinson's shoulders and showed that he was supporting Jackie Robinson, his teammate. And this silenced everybody in the stands, and then there was no more heckling. And this is considered one of the great moments in baseball history. And there's even been a monument in Coney Island showing Reese with his arm around Jackie Robinson. However, there are other baseball historians, not Peter Golenbach, but other historians who say, well, we've checked all the newspapers in the black press and the white press, and nobody says there was any hostility at all. Nobody says they have seen Pee-wee Reese put his arm around Jackie Robinson. And even in Jackie Robinson's first memoir, which was written with Wendell Smith, a great African-American writer for the Pittsburgh Courier, there's no mention of anything like this transpiring in 1947. However, Robinson does say something similar happened in 1948 in Boston, but it might have been because just that Pee-wee Reese was being heckled, oddly enough, about becoming friends from the stands, about being friendly toward a black teammate. And at that point, they either Reese put his arm around Jackie Robinson or they touched hands, which is what Rachel Robinson believed happened at some point. I think she doesn't like the paternalistic look of the image of Pee-wee Reese putting his arm around Robinson and showing that I accept you kind of thing. And Don Newcombe said he didn't need anybody to show that kind of camaraderie. He didn't need his teammate Don Newcombe. But what I think, and reading all this material about Jackie Robinson talking about Pee-wee Reese, he loved Pee-wee Reese. He always said that Pee-wee Reese was friendly toward him, and when Pee-wee Reese's relatives would come up from Kentucky to Cincinnati, Pee-wee Reese made it his job, I guess, to introduce Jackie to these rednecks from Kentucky who had never
probably meeting their
in
first
their life.
Man in their life. You're right.
Yeah, had never met a black man. I mean, a lot of these guys had never shaken hands with a black guy. They never, it's just really strange. So what I'm saying, and then maybe it's wishy-washy, but there was a lot of camaraderie between these two men. This on an equal partnership, the second baseman and the shortstop. They were friends. Robinson loved the guy. Reese loved Robinson. They had tremendous respect for each other as character and as baseball players. And Jackie, they were both winners. And if it didn't happen in 47, if it didn't happen in 48, I'm sure. And if it didn't happen on the ball field, I'm sure it happened many, many times. These two guys put their arms around each other, and just so that's my response to that. So if they didn't happen on the field, it may as well have happened, and we can.
And it happened in spirit, which is
yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll ask you one final question about Pee-wee, and then we can get on to other things. Or not really about Pee-wee, but on Pee-wee Reese Day, Pee-wee Day, or night, they threw a night for him. They had Confederate flags in the stands in Brooklyn. Did Jackie ever react to that? And this is not my question. This is Peter Trunk's question, and I think it's a great question. Is there anything in all those quotes where Jackie went, whoa, to Confederate flags in Brooklyn?
It's actually interesting you mentioned this. I've never seen it. I've never read anything where Jackie commented on that. I do, in the book, there are quotes about that particular day from Doris Kearns Goodwin, the famous historian, particularly about American presidents. And
right.
who grew up in Brooklyn, and she went to that game, and she doesn't mention that at all. She just mentions getting Jackie Robinson's autograph in her autograph book, where he looked and saw these little quips from her classmates at school, and he added his name to it. You know, he was saying, "Keep smiling," or whatever. that was it. So it was a nice gesture.
Very nice.
I grew up in the South. I grew up in South Carolina. I don't think the Confederate flag meant the same thing then that it does now. I don't think it meant a symbol. It was a symbol of racism. I think it was more of just. I don't know. It's hard to explain it if you're not from the South. I'm completely against.
Everybody from the South might not have the same take on that. Too.
I'm not. I want to make sure this is clear. I definitely don't think the Confederate flag should be flown nowadays. I'm completely against it because I think it has a specific meaning right now. At the time, it was just, part of the history and part of the pride people had in just growing up wherever they grew up. It wasn't specific. I mean, I'm sure it was for a lot of people that it was a symbol of racism, but it was more than that at the time. At times of change, and obviously the meaning of the Confederate flag.
Or as kids, we used to have toy soldiers with gray and blue and glorified.
We used to play Civil War at recess in the South. I mean, that's what some people would pretend to be. The Northerners and the good guys be the rebels, but we didn't think about any of that. But it was all battles. It wasn't about policy. Let's put it that way. It wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't.
And only because you grew up in the South am I going to address this one last thing, and it does concern Pee Wee Reese. The stories for years was that Pee Wee Reese, his dad, when he was a kid, took him to a tree and said, "Son, this is where a terrible thing happened years ago, and I could have done something to stop it. A black person was lynched at that tree, and for the rest of my life, I've felt horrible that I didn't do anything. And I just want you to know, stand up. People are people, this, that, and the other thing." Okay? And this has been what was said, and that's where Pee Wee got a lot of his humanity, because that didn't come easily in the South, with no respect for a lot of what goes on. And the day after we had Harold Parrott on the show talking about that, great, not Harold Parrott, his son Brian talking about his dad and talking about those days. The day after we had him on, Ken Burns comes out with a documentary, and the tree story is told, but in a totally different manner. It was told to show how much Pee Wee had to overcome to be the man that he was, by saying that his dad had said, "This is what happens to uppity blah, 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 blah. Here in the South, you are a Southerner. This is our tradition, and we want you to know it." And Peter and I, that next day, we couldn't believe it, because we had just been talking about the story from the other side. You know what I mean? From his dad teaching him a wonderful life's lesson, to his dad being an example, learning by, it doesn't have to be a good example that you learn by. You could learn by somebody else's bad example. So I would like you, I'm not going to tell you what Peter and I came to the conclusion what we thought. I want to know what you thought, what you think, and what you're more apt to believe, given.
Well, I always heard the negative story. I mean, the Ken Burns story is the story that I heard.
Oh wow!
You know,
wow.
It's very hard to verify because Peary Reese is one of the few, Hall of Famers from that era that never wrote an autobiography. So he never can really tell. And Roger Kahn, in Boys of Summer interviewed Peary Reese, and I don't think he touched on that story. I'm not 100% sure because I haven't, memory-wise, I don't remember. I haven't read that for a while, the Peary Reese part. But I think Peary Reese was always different than everybody around him in the sense that he didn't conform. He always formed his own opinion. And he always thought things through. And he always was open to different types of people, which is why he became such a great captain for the Dodgers. Like anybody who joined the team, he would welcome them and help them find places to live and, tell them how to come to the ballpark, drive to the ballpark. He was always taking care of everybody, and that's why everybody on that Dodger team, no matter the color, loved Peary Reese. Peary Reese, like a lot of people, kind of learned a lot when he was in the service. When he went away from Kentucky, he went off and joined the military. And one of the major things that he saw in the military, even though it took a while for Harry Truman to integrate the military, he did recognize that blacks were fighting in the war. There was a lot, thousands of black soldiers, and he respected that a lot. And that was one of the reasons in 1947 when the Dixie Walker tried to pass along the boy he wanted to start a boycott on the team.
He passed around a petition that he wanted people to.
Yeah. He signed the petition, Jackie Peary Reese. It was a petition, so we will not play with a black player on our ball team. At this time, it was spring training, and Jackie Robinson was still on the roster of Montreal, the AAA team, and they were afraid that he would be promoted to the major leagues, which he was. And the petition never made it. Never made it for several reasons, and part of the reason Leo DeRocher and Branch Rickey both found out about it and called in all the players and told them that they were gone if they didn't want to play with Jackie Robinson, because Jackie Robinson was going to be a player on the Dodgers no matter what. So that's what stopped it. But the other thing is Peary Reese from Kentucky refused to sign it. And part of his reason was when I was in the Army, I knew that there were a lot of, he was in the Navy, but in the military, I saw that there were a lot of black ball players. And, black soldiers. And I'm not going to forget that. How can they fight with us and not be our baseball teammates? Now, he wasn't happy, admittedly, when he found out that the player that was coming up to the Dodgers had been, this is back in 1945 when it was learned that Branch Rickey had signed a black ball player, Jackie Robinson, that at the time Jackie Robinson was a shortstop with the Kansas City Monarchs, and Peary said, "Oh no, of all the players to sign, it's the shortstop." But then he started thinking about it, and I mentioned before how he thought things through. He said, what if I were a white ball player joining a black team, a Negro League team? what would I, be going through? How awkward and lonely would that be? And he, by the time, his ship docked in America and he got off, he was very willing to have Jackie Robinson compete with him at shortstop, and let the better man win. And he was going to be helpful to Jackie Robinson. And so this is the guy who was a little kid whose father took him off to look at this tree where there was lynching going on, and people know in the South there was a lot of lynching going on, including when Jackie Robinson was born. Yeah. So either way,
if it was the negative one, like Peter Trunk, you and I agree upon that. Well, all seem to think it was that. Then he had more to overcome. It was just he was a courageous man because
it was basically going against the grain. He owned a bowling alley in Kentucky. A lot of these other white players, including Dixie Walker, in those days, nobody could just make a living playing baseball. So if they were lucky and, they were famed ball players, they got to, they owned a little store, or they owned a gas station, or they owned a bowling alley or something where they had a little business.
Hardware store.
Yeah, hardware store, or they had a farm and they, whatever. And they had to sell products and, whatever. They counted on business from all their friends, and this was all threatened by the fact that they had agreed to play with a black on the Brooklyn Dodgers, which sounds very minor to people, but remember, it was Jim Crow era, and there was no integration in sports. You could not play ball in the South.
Racism was overt as opposed to the way it is today, where it's covert. So
well, I tell you, when I told you I lived in Columbia, South Carolina, and in the 1950s, like 1957, we had somebody come over to do some carpentry or something on our house in Columbia, and he brought his son, and I was probably like 8 or 9, and the son of the carpenter was about 12 or 13, and we just started throwing a football around in the front yard and had fun. He was a really nice kid. And later on that day, neighbors came over to talk to my parents to complain because a white kid and a black kid are not allowed to play ball together, according to the Jim Crow laws. And in professional sports, you weren't allowed to do that. It was against the law, amazingly. So that's the era that
in our lifetime, that's a disgrace. It's not like it was, we're talking about 100 years ago, 200 years ago. We're talking about stuff we grew up, and where Kennedy couldn't get the civil rights thing passed, had to be left to Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson, yeah.
Yeah.
So Jackie Robinson, before he played joined the Dodgers, and they went south and during spring training, and they did the spring training in Florida, and he got to see firsthand what the Jim Crow laws were. He'd actually experienced tremendous racism in Pasadena, California. That was one of the surprises I had. I knew he'd experienced some, but they almost had the same thing. They had discrimination. He couldn't belong to, go to the Y except on one day a week because he was black, and they couldn't swim in the local swimming pool, black kids, except on the day that they changed the water anyway. It was, and he couldn't sit in the movie theater. They had to go up in the balcony, which
that's in California.
This is in Pasadena, California. Yeah, and he was a little kid. He was he and a bunch of other kids were, arrested, thrown in jail for a day, for doing certain things, and they were always police after them. And it wasn't
no idea.
So unlike what he experienced. What happened? Rachel Robinson came from a different part of California and didn't experience that quite as much. So when they went to Florida together in 1946 to train with Montreal, and she experienced Jim Crow for the first time, and she could not believe it. She'd never experienced anything like this before. But Jackie actually had.
They bumped them off airplanes that would.
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, they had a hard time. They had a hard time arriving. Like twice they were knocked off airplanes and replaced by white passengers. You know, the indignities that they experienced. You know, it's having to sit out, including sitting in the back of a bus. You know, transporting them to Sanford, Florida. It was, and then she saw. You know, there are the whites-only water fountains, and she saw the whites-only waiting areas and bus terminals, and she saw whites-only bathrooms and bathrooms for quote unquote colored people, and people who saw the Ken Burns biography recently on television, the documentaries, where she talks about how she said, to heck with it, and she went into the women's bathroom, which the white women's bathroom, and then so that was like an amazing thing. And I wonder if she lived in the South, if she would have dared to do that. But she's a strong woman, a partner of Jackie all through his life.
And I've always said behind every man, there's a more successful woman pushing him along.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know, the word behind, she would never accept that, and he would never accept that. There are many quotes in Jackie Robinson in Quotes book. There are many quotes where people say, "Hey, didn't you already use that quote where Jackie says, I couldn't have done it without Rachel? Didn't you use that back in 1946 as you're moving through his career?" And I'd say, yes, I used it in 46 because he said it in 46. I used it again in 47 because he said he needed her in 47, and I use it throughout the book because he said it over and over. I couldn't have done it without Rachel. And Rachel's thing, a quote that she had after he died is, she says it's been stated often how Jackie Robinson couldn't have done it without me, and she says, well, I couldn't have done it without him too. So it was a real partnership, and they were both on the line, and they both needed to succeed together, and they did.
You know, you answered my question, what did you learn? My next question up the line, what did you learn? And that was a great answer, that his Pasadena experience. I just assumed he grew up in a mixed community of folk that
no. The interesting thing is how the great women, Rachel Robinson's such a remarkable person, and she's always been one of my heroes. But he also had as she always said, the great influence on his life, and particularly his formative years, was his mother, Molly, Mallie. They came from, I don't know if people realize, he was born in Georgia, but as a baby, Molly, took the 5 kids after being abandoned by Jackie's father and went across country by train to Pasadena. And for a while they lived with her brother there, but then she and one of her brothers-in-laws pooled their money together to buy a house, and they sort of snuck into an all-white neighborhood. The people didn't realize who they were selling to, so she took the chance, and then she got this piece of property on Pepper Street. And then eventually she actually had about three or four other pieces of property. But she bought this big house, and it was an all-white neighborhood, and they were not welcome at all. So this is the first time we see this, is Jackie Robinson being part of something where there's forced integration going on. And there will be cross burnings. There was a lot of people calling the police anytime the kids were outside on the sidewalk, which Jackie always was, because he liked doing sports outside. And there would be something. The police were always involved, but the mother, Molly, just stood up to everything. And eventually, they did live there all those years, but it was basically an all-white neighborhood, although his gang, his Pepper Street gang, which was his kind of like the dead-end kids, they just did sort of okay little minor crimes, like stealing a peach from a grocery stand kind of things. Right. But they were integrated. There was black, there were whites, there were Asians. So it was, he was always part of, integration was always on his mind, that's a theme of his life.
How much of his personality was made up by his father's abandonment, do you suppose? Did that
he had a lot of anger about that. Jackie
talk about it a lot?
What he did was, originally he would say that my father died. Even in his first autobiography, he wouldn't admit that he was still alive. He was so angry with this guy for abandoning. He went off. He was a philanderer. The father, Jerry, they were sharecroppers in Georgia, and he was like, and he ran off with another man's wife. He said, "I'm going into town," and he never came back. That kind of thing. And abandoned the family, and Jackie just had anger with him. According to his older sister, Willa Mae, in fact his only sister, that Jackie met him once as, and this was a quote in the book, is about how he met him once as an adult, and I think it was after he was a successful ball player, and Jackie wanted nothing to do with him. So that was it for Jackie and his father. But his mother was mother and father, and his older sister, Willa Mae, really took care of him. And he had three brothers, and so he was taken care of. So
and a terrific athlete too.
Mac Robinson, his first idol was his older brother, who was in the 1936 Olympics as a sprinter and won a silver medal behind Jesse Owens in the 220 yard dash.
Marty Glickman was in at Olympics
if you weren't Jewish.
If you weren't Jewish,
yeah.
It's tough for us Jews, to get by.
Yeah, know all about it.
We can only do podcast. That's what they said.
Interesting is Marty Glickman, who became a fixture in New York, a great sports broadcaster. He and Jackie Robinson had a TV show, or I think it was TV, but they were pushing it for TV, because I don't remember this at all, because I wasn't from New York. Or a radio thing where people would answer questions from fans. So Marty Glickman and Jackie Robinson, and maybe. I never thought about it, but maybe it dates back to the 30s when he was a friend of Marty and Mac Robinson, or at least, teammates, running mates, and I think probably friends. So maybe the friendship Jackie had with Marty had to deal with, goes back to the 30s.
Yeah. The rift, the overall rift between the blacks and the Jews in this country is tragic, because the Jews
were so strong. The bond was so strong.
It was. The Jew board of directors and funded the NAACP when it was born, and to see what the relationship, and not every Jew, not every black, but big rift socially, big problem in our country.
A lot of the fans that Jackie, the staunchest fans that he had in the 1940s, when he joined the Brooklyn Dodgers, were young Jewish boys. Yeah, Jewish kids.
Have you met Ronnie Rabinovich? I'm sure you.
No, but I do have quotes by Ronnie Rabinovich in the book.
He's been a guest.
For people who don't know him, there's Jackie Robinson. He's from Wisconsin, and his father was a Democrat and fought for civil rights. He was a civil rights. He was a lawyer, and somewhere or the other, Jackie and this young kid from Wisconsin started being pen pals. And Ronnie would give Jackie, he would give Jackie a lot of encouragement, say, keep going strong, don't ever let the hecklers get the best of you, and all that kind of stuff. And Jackie would write him back, and even he invited him to come see a Dodgers game.
He went to his parties. He went to his birthday parties.
He had a birthday party in the stands, and Jackie Robinson hit a home run that day. And as he circled the bases, pointed to Ronnie Rabinovich in the stands. So they continued after Jackie Robinson retired as a ball player, and Ronnie Rabinovich grew up and became an adult himself. They continued their camaraderie. So it's an interesting relationship. I did a book on a biography of Roger Maris years ago, and he also had this young pen pal. And he went through so much too, from different corners, a lot of criticism, and he needed the encouragement from outsiders as well, and he maintained a friendship all through his life with this guy who met him this young boy who met him at the outside of baseball stadium, and they became friends.
It's a magical thing. It just.
Jackie Robinson.
I tingle when I hear some of these stories. It's just, it's beautiful how the players were, and I'm not saying they're all not human as they were back then. You mentioned that players had to go to work. Yogi Berra worked in a clothing store.
Yeah.
Phil Rizzuto had a bowling alley.
Jackie Robinson started a little clothing store. Roy Campanella had a liquor store. And Gil Hodges tried to sell television sets, and they were they sell cars, whatever. So they all needed extra work.
What was Gil and Jackie's relationship like?
Great. That was. A great Rachel and Rachel would always just say Jackie's main goal was to win. I mean, he was like the biggest competitor. He's known as the greatest competitor ever. So his whole thing was, how can I be on a team with black and white ball players and show people that an integrated baseball team can win? And as Rachel would say, we had Peary Reese, at shortstop and Gil Hodges at first base, and he considered them both close friends and winners. And that Gil helped them win. He also helped stop a lot of fights at second base because Gil was considered the strongest baseball player ever. So if anybody was going after Jackie, he would start a fight that looked like it was racially charged. Gil would stop it, but also there wasn't a lot of socializing between black and white players in that day, but they did go out the two married couples. So that was a really good relationship, and you'll see what Rachel said is. Pardon me?
I was just going to say, were there any negative interactions with players there's a rumor that Carl Furillo and Jackie...
Well, he signed the petition. Carl Furillo signed the petition. Carl Furillo was not a Southerner like a lot of the Southerners signed the petition of Dixie Walker.
Pennsylvania guy.
Bob, Reading, Pennsylvania, the Reading, but he kind of did it being totally naive, and I guess he was coerced, and he always resented it, and so one of the quotes is in the book is somebody describing how when the Dodgers won the 1955 World Series and they're all celebrating in the fancy hotel afterwards, you have Carl Furillo and Jackie Robinson hugging each other, and that's like a great image that how they started out as potential enemies.
Right.
Furillo was somebody, even, Gil Hodges got along with Furillo, and not too many other people did. But I'm not saying that's necessarily a negative, but, we're talking about athletes, and, not everybody liked all these guys, you pick, they all had their enemies, not a lot of them had social graces, so Furillo is considered an outsider by a lot of people, and Gil Hodges is one of the few who could be really close with him. But I think Sandy Koufax became friends with Furillo. But there was a lot of...
He's kind of a loner.
Yeah. That's what I would say. He didn't fit in anywhere, but he's somebody who years later, like Dixie Walker, apologized for the petition thing. Furillo, I think, wanted to keep it secret that he ever did it. That was like a blight on his career, and kind of unlike him. Dixie Walker was very consistent with his personality, and all these guys like. Hugh Casey and Eddie Stanky and Kirby Higbee, those guys, Bobby Bragan even at the time, that was consistent with them signing the petition. But Furillo, nobody really knew why he did it, but he was apologetic years later, and so, as far as he said it.
It's interesting that you mentioned Bobby Bragan. Bobby Bragan was credited with helping Maury Wills, a black man, and a Dodger later on, to get through the minor leagues. He taught him how to switch hit and what have you. So,
and what's an interesting story is Bobby Bragan was called in 1947 when Branch Rickey found out who signed that petition. He brought Bobby Bragan, and he said, "You signed this petition." And Bobby Bragan said, "I don't want." He was coming from the South. "I don't want to play with a black ball player. I want you to trade me." And he didn't trade him right away. And Bobby Bragan watched in 1947 playing with a black ball player. He learned unbelievable respect for this guy, Jackie Robinson. You saw what a great ball player he was and a winner, but also a decent human being and somebody who had a lot of integrity. And Bobby Bragan, although he was traded later, became as a coach and a manager, and he always credited that season with Jackie Robinson where he learned his lesson about blacks. He knew nothing about them, and he always said, because of my relationship with Jackie Robinson, and I guess it continued a while because when Branch Rickey died eventually, Bobby Bragan says Jackie and I sat in the pew together. We were the two guys. He always credited with Jackie Robinson of changing him for the better and made it possible for when he became manager to deal with black players himself, including Maury Wills. And to do it sincerely and not paternalistically, but just do it man-to-man kind of stuff. And he, being with Jackie Robinson, he said, that was a life-changing thing and a career-changing thing for Bobby Bragan. So he became, I knew Bobby a little later on in his career. Sort of toward the end of his life, actually. And good guy. and he did change, and his whole Bobby Bragan's whole thing was teaching. He liked to teach baseball to people, not just have how do you play baseball, and that was his thing, and he didn't care who his pupil was.
The nuances of what gets it done. Hey, we could go on forever. It's been an hour. You're terrific. Wait until I read the book, then I'll know something to ask you.
Well, you seem to know a lot about the book. I would say Jackie Robinson quotes the two. There's so many surprises. The two big surprises for me, and I think for readers, was how famous Jackie Robinson was as a football player when he played even at Pasadena Junior College, but then UCLA, and he was written about even in like New York Times across the country. This is how famous he was, because he's often portrayed as, Branch Rickey found this guy in the Negro Leagues, had no idea who he was, but he was like a famous athlete. So that was a big surprise to me. And the other big surprise to me, and Ralph, you probably, I'm sure you remember, watching Jackie Robinson at the end of his career, his hair turned white. He was, and this, we always said this is from what he went through being the first black ball player and all the racism and all the heckling, and he went through year after year, including in his final year, 1956, which that's a little surprise too. He was still getting all the insults and the heckling, and Major League Baseball didn't even like him because he was a very vocal guy. And then he got diabetes. We know about his diabetes. And he died when he was just 53 years old in 1972. And we all were told, and we all believe, the reason he died so young, and Rachel would confirm this, was because what he went through as a baseball player and his diabetes. Combined to that, that's why he died so young. But there's a third factor, and equal to those others, and that's what he went through after his baseball career, when he was himself a civil rights activist, and he did march with Martin Luther King, and he did the fundraising for the NAACP, and he toured the South, when they were collecting money because there were church burnings going on there, and then he watched as Martin Luther King was assassinated, and he saw John Kennedy, who was making progress in terms of civil rights, which surprised him. And he was killed, and Medgar Evers was killed, and even Malcolm X, who he disagreed with politically, but they had some admiration for each other. He died. He just died. There was so much disillusion going on with him because as he grew older, not only did Major League Baseball sever ties with him, but the black activists and the new people in the civil rights movement considered him passé. And once Jackie Robinson stopped writing a column for the Amsterdam News, he didn't really have a forum to talk about these things. So when he died, still no major league manager who was black, and the civil rights movement had stalled, and there hadn't been the progress in the black community that he had been fighting for all his life. All this social justice and integration that leads to equal opportunity and for new economic clout and political clout and first-class citizenship. And none of that was there. He was just completely dissatisfied at the point he died, and not realizing what would continue. And that, I think, equally contributed to his early demise, and I think that should be talked about a lot more. And that's a big part of this book. People will be surprised seeing, how he moved from mainstream politics, even being a Republican at some point, to very militant politics, particularly in his writings and whatever. It's a really fascinating story after his baseball career ended, and that's the real surprise for me.
Thank you, Danny Peary. You're terrific.
Well, thank you so much.
I hope you come back under different circumstances, different books, different projects, or just to talk about the past
baseball.
and future. Yeah, baseball is where it's at. You're also a big movie buff. Have to have you in on one of my non-baseball shows, and we'll talk. We could talk baseball movies, the 10 best baseball movies, and
okay.
Show of it.
I've probably seen them all.
I'll bet you have. All right, Danny. Thank you,
okay,
sir.
thanks a lot, Ralph. Always a pleasure.
It is.
Yeah. And Jackie Robinson in quotes is available in Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but I always tell people if you have a favorite independent bookstore, that's where I would love you to order that book. So
wonderful. I hope you come out here on a book tour. I hope you go to Books Inc. and come out to Alameda. Would that be cool for me? You'd have a place to stay.
Thanks so much, Ralph. Always a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Danny. And to my listener out there, there's at least one of you, I'd like to just say keep your dreams wet and your humor dry. Have a great one.